select the default cube and level it with the ground inside edit mode. The pivot point is now at bottom as shown. To change the dimensions, press N to open the item parameters. What I need first is the stairs. The step height would be half its depth, and make it long on the x-axis. After that, press Ctrl A to apply scale. Inside edit mode, select the upper edge and bevel it to smooth the area. Now, use the array modifier to make copies of this step. Once you're done with that, let us add a cube and scale it up to contain the stairs we made. Turn on the snap-on vertices to position the cube right. I moved the cube here by 10 for now. After that, add a loop cut so we can extrude this part of the floor to the upper stair level. I did here extrude the edges to cover the first area and make another one behind the door. Now, to front view, place the camera there. Then, in the resolution, change it a bit to something like those numbers. Try moving the camera inside the cube and make the focal length 28 to mimic real-life lens. Once you've finished with the camera, add a cylinder to start modeling the columns. We will do it simple: extrude the face, scale it, and move it up. That's the main process. You can always have a reference image of medieval columns and just draw over it. Once you're done with the shape, add some smoothness to the model by beveling the edges. We can now place the columns around the camera frames both near the camera and on the upper level. Use Shift-D to copy the column around. I can't make a cut on this face, so let's just delete it, and make a new plane in this area. use the snap tool to place it where it should, and scale it up to cover the wall needed. Now, from the camera view, add some cuts on this new wall to mark the door frame. After that, add a new cylinder, isolate it, and inside edit mode, try to keep just half of this cylinder. This will be the arc around the door once we extrude it. So, to make the arc, we need the spin tool. One thing important with this tool is the cursor position, so place it right. And make sure to choose the correct axis. In my case it's the y-axis. You can also in the tool settings, increase the segments count to smooth the arc. Here, I made some cuts and extrude some faces along normal to add some kind of base to the arc around the door. And again, try to bevel the edges to smooth the shape. Now once you're done with the bevel, copy it along the wall. Use the mirror command to flip the copy and complete the shape around the wall. We can now join those two parts. Inside edit mode, select the edges between them and use bridge to cover this gap. On the wall here, add a loop cut and move it up like shown. Now, from the front view, and with the X-ray mode on, try to bevel some of the vertices around the arc to shape the door. Use Shift-Ctrl-B to bevel vertices. After that, select those faces and use I key to inset them as shown. Try to make some basic shapes on the door. Now here, once we bevel the upper vertices and inset those faces, the loop cut won't work anymore. So, use the knife tool to make some cuts on the door faces. How the knife tool work, you ask? It's simple. Press on any point you want to start with, go to the next point and select it. To finish the process, hit spacebar. Also, press C to restrict movements on horizontal or vertical lines only. Delete this part of the door. We will model the right one, then copy it once we finished. Here, I did select this part of the door and hit P to separate it from the wall. Now copy it and flip it with mirror command. So, let's make a new collection for lights. Press and drag from this corner to open a new work window. Make it on Shade Editor. Change it from here to World Shading. To set up a sky, we will use an Hdri node. For that, we need an environment texture. Open it and select the sky map. Switch now to render mode. We also need to cut some holes for the light to go through. Using Ctrl-R for loop cuts. Make it as you see fit, and delete some faces to make the light pass. Switch now to Cycles Render Engine to see what we have. So, I think having more stairs would look better. We can just extrude the floor here toward bottom and just extend the stairs by copying them. I did here move this wall with all the meshes around it back to extend the area near the door. Now, add a sunlight, place it to the left as shown, and use the yellow dot to point the sun rays in the right direction. In the sun parameters, increase the power a bit, and give it a sky blue color. I will delete some new faces and adjust the sun position until the shadows looks good. Once you are done with the sunlight, go to File menu, hit Append, and bring the skull model to the scene. Then, select the two columns on the right with the skull and isolate those objects. We will copy the skull model around each column of those two, and the method is simple. First, select this column and put the cursor in its center as shown with Shift S. Then, select the skull, choose Selection to Cursor from the Shift S menu, move it in place and scale it up until it looks fit. After that, from the Object tab, set the origin to cursor so that the skull can rotate around the column. Now, use Shift-D to copy it, rotate the new copy, and hit Shift-R to repeat the process. Once you're done here, select all the skulls and join them in one object. Copy this skull collection to the other column and scale it to fit. Next up is the torch model. Append it as we did before, and place it on any area you see fit. Make it from here on object shading to start adding materials to the objects, and switch to material preview mode. So, I will add some cuts on the floor to make some square tiles. After that, select those faces and inset them a bit, then extrude them up just so they look like tiles. I did here put the pivot on individual objects and scale the faces down as shown, and like always, use the bevel to smooth the edges. I will use one material in this scene, and it's a kit library material called concrete base. What I need to do here is to apply this material on the walls and the floor one by one, then, we will change some of the floor parameters to make more reflective. So, we need to apply the concrete on the entire object. The texture is too big, so we need to adjust it. In edit mode, select all, and hit U to UV and wrap this texture over the object faces. We also have a mapping node here that will help us scale down the texture until it looks fit. Once you're done with fixing the texture, add a new material. We will assign the floor to this one. After that, hit the number near the material name to separate it from the first one. Here before the output node, I will add a glossy node and mix it with the principled BSDF. Make the glossy roughness value 0 to give us the reflections we need. We also going to add a Fresnel node in the mix factor input. With the Fresnel, the reflection will look more realistic between the objects. Experiment with the I/O/R value in it and switch to render view to see what we have. I think we could make the material a bit brighter by adding a mix color node right before the color input. The scene meant to be dark, so making the concrete brighter from now is likely a good idea. And keep in mind, the darker the material, the more reflective it's going to look, so in brighten it, we can make it less reflective. And like the floor, I added a color mix node to the wall concrete and shift the value toward the white color to make the concrete brighter. After that, select one of the columns and apply the same wall concrete material to it. In edit mode, select all and hit U to unwrap it using cube projection method. I did here open a new work window and put it on UV editor. I think the column texture is a bit small, so select all in UV editor and scale it down. Once you finished with this column, apply the same material on the rest of them, including the skull objects. You can always hit the number near the material name to separate it from the main concrete one and make adjustments to it. Here, I used link command to copy the material and the UV map to the other column. I do think the skull might look better with some reflections, so I copied those 3 nodes from the floor and placed them in the skull object nodes tree as shown. In links command, always select the object you need to take from at last. In our case, we selected the skulls that didn't have the material. After that, we selected this one at last, which have the new reflective concrete that we need, and we link them together as shown. Join the 2 stairs and apply to it the same floor material. Use Smart UV Project to unwrap it. The arc frame around the door will take the same material as the columns. I'm also going to add a new cube here and use subdivision modifier to shape it as simple crown for the arc. Join it with the arc once you're done, and UV unwrap it with Smart Project. Now, to the door, join the two parts and isolate it with Shift-H. Then, add a new material to it, make the color toward gray and increase the reflection with both the metallic and roughness values. Here before the output, I will add a displacement node. We will use a bitmap in the height input to add a shape on the door. Use any symbol you want, just make sure it's black and white. After that, use Project from View to UV, unwrap the texture on the door, and in the UV editor, select all and adjust it as you see fit. I did make the scale value 5 in the displacement node. Once you're done with that, separate the door again and make sure to place the pivot point of each part in its corner, so that we can rotate it right. In this back room, I will extend it a bit, and give the walls a light emission material. Make the color warm toward orange, and increase the power to something around 50. I did add a cut in the middle of each column and scale it up to make a bump. I have this archer model open on the side. Using a simple copy-paste process we can bring it to our scene. Here, inside the torch, I will add a sphere and give it an emission light material. I am also going to add a cube here and scale it up to cover the torch as shown. This cube will have a fire material, so append it to the scene. We can take the same color from the fire and give it to the light sphere, and also, increase the power in it to around 30. To cast extra light on the column we will use area light sources, 2 of them, and direct them toward up and bottom from the torch area. Give the area light a warm color, and the power should be around 2 or 3 for each light. Once you're done, copy all those to the second torch object. I did here make the backrooms light 100 in power. I need to adjust the sun a bit, and make more areas for the light to pass. We also need a volume in this scene, so add a new cube, and scale it up until it covers the area needed. After that, in the shade editor, add a new material, delete the BSDF and replace it with volume scatter. This will go into the volume input as shown. Lower the density value to around 0.04. I will make some adjustment to the scene before we render it. First the floor. I think it need less reflection, so fix that in the glossy and frontal nodes as shown. I did also add an area light behind the door to boost the light from there. In the sun parameters, experiment with the angel value to affect the shadow sharpness. Now is the time to add your touch to the scene. Maybe add some shapes to the columns like we did with the door, or copy the crown over the arc into 111. Statues might look nice also, lion face statues and some stuffs like that. You got the idea. Once you done with all of that, to the render settings, easy as always, make the sample count around 1000, and turn off caustics. This hair option is also not needed. Use auto tile add-on that come with Blender for the right render tile size. In the resolution, make it 200%, and turn on denoising. Hit F12 once you done.
2,000 years later.
And here is the render. Let's jump into Photoshop. So, first try to fix those light reflections on the floor. We do that using various tools. The spot healing tool will automatically take samples from the surrounding pixels and fix the area needed. Press the right mouse button to adjust the brush scale. For this big reflection, we will select the area around it with the lasso tool. Press the right mouse button over the selection and fill it. Choose Content Aware Fill to fix the floor. You can go back to the Spot tool and fix any remaining trace. Those reflections here are on the tile edge, so we need another tool called the Healing Brush. It's right under the spot that we used earlier. With this one, we can hold the Alt key, and take a sample in which we can fix the area needed. Keep in mind, the sample origin point will move in the same direction as your brush. You can now copy this layer by right-click on it and choose Duplicate. Turn off the bottom one from the eye icon. So the main thing we need to do here is masking. I will use the Pen tool for that. Select it from the toolbar, zoom into the first column and start drawing. Once you set a point, hold your left click over it and move the mouse to make it curve. You can also hold Alt and press over the point to make the curve end there. Once you're done with the first column, repeat the process in the another one to the left. Now, hold over the Pin tool until you see the convert point. Use the last one to select all the points as shown and make them into selection with the right mouse button. After that, hit Ctrl J to make a new layer out of this selection. Now, go to File and select Place Embedded. From here, we can add a texture and apply it inside the selection we made. Scaling this image to fit the column would make the texture look big. So, I make another copy of it, flip it vertically so it match the upper one, join the two of them with ctrl E, and scale the new layer to fit the column area. We can also use the spot healing tool to fix this dark area in the middle. Once you're done with that, copy it to the left column, and again join the two layers with ctrl E. Hold the Alt key between this new layer and the column selection one until you see a small arrow pointing toward bottom, hit it to make the texture inside selection only. Make the opacity on low values, something around 7 or 8. After that, from the bottom bar, hit the mask icon, and you should see it now near the texture. Now, understanding masks in a nutshell: white means the texture shown on all parts of the column, black mean it won't appear. So, we can select the brush tool from the main bar on the left, make the color black. You can also adjust the brush scale with the right mouse button, and make the flow value around 8. So, with the mask selected, and the brush on black, once you draw, it should erase the texture. What I need to do is to darken some areas like those skull faces or the edges near the floor, something like that. Holding Shift over the mask will disable it. You can also switch the color to white and repaint the texture over any part you erased from the mask. Once you're done with this column, do the same thing on the other one. It's basic stuff but can take some time, and for that, I recommend making some tea, or coffee. Also, some biscuit would be nice, and roll with it. Just make sure to keep drinks and food away from your laptop. So, we done with the close columns. Let us add a texture over the floor area. As before, take the pin tool and select the area needed. Make a new layer out of this selection, and throw a texture over it as we did before. I am just going to let you watch the process and will comment if needed. Here, I select the lasso tool and hold Alt to subtract the area around the model. And as before, I embedded a texture, and to keep it small, I will copy it around couple of times and flip the copies so it connect well. Once you done, make sure all those copies in one layer and hold the Alt key until you see the arrow between this texture and the floor selection. One more thing I need to show you is how to add lights. Select the main layer, and with the lasso tool, make a selection from the door toward the character. Then, add to it a curve adjustment layer, make this layer on top, and experiment with the curve to increase the brightness. You can also hit Ctrl T and scale it up until it seems fit. After that, go to Filters to add Gaussian blur, increase the blur value to around 90. We are going to add a second light layer inside this one. This new light will be smaller, brighter, and less blurred. Once you're done with the lights, we can add a mask on both of them to darken the cape so that it looks more natural.
One eternity later.
So, let me show you what I did here. First, with the same process, I selected the wall and added a texture over its selection layer. Those big columns in the back have a texture over them in the same method. The door have a metallic texture in the same select mask way. I did also select the light between the door parts and make a new layer from selection, then give it a glow effect with the blending options. For the symbol lights, I cut the white background from this image, added a glow effect from the blending options, and place it over the door. We also have a light beam image that I threw over the scene. I did add a mask on it, and use the brush to delete some parts that should be darker. Once you're done with this, hold Shift to select all layers, hit Ctrl-Shift-T to join them. After that, from the color lookup table, I will use this preset. Decrease the opacity on it to something around 60%. Now, join it with the main layer, and with the right click, choose Convert to Smart Object. Then, go to Filter and select Camera Raw. Experiment with it, and focus on those four: exposure, contrast, highlights and a haze. They can make quite the difference in any image. And that's it for now. Stay sharp guys, goodbye.